how do we figure out who we are? And I heard a pastor a long time ago say, man, we can find this, find that, find this in our spirituality and find peace and love and service. But very few of us ever find ourselves spiritually in our own identity. And one of the things, to me, it's simple. Fulfillment is being faithful to your core values. The other part of the equation is executing those values, executing the action of them. Because if you are faithful to those core values, then you, by definition, have to execute in them.
Hello and welcome back to the Connected Mindset Live. I'm your host, Greg Tomchick. Another beautiful day. Welcome you to this episode, Mr. Adam Kasich. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Greg. Super pumped to be here, man.
Yeah, welcome back. Second time. We had Adam on one of the first few episodes of the Connected Mindset Live. It was a huge springboard for the platform that we wanted to build. We talked a lot about Adam's story of transformation, some of the identity shifts that he had to go through, which was just an incredible episode. So definitely check that out. I'll make sure that link's in the show notes. One of the things we also talked about is the friction that we get when we go through these identity shifts from either the outside world or from our inside world. And it was a concept that a lot of people really stuck to when it came to them evolving their identity and not feeling like there was an end state. They wanted to reach that end goal and be in that happy, fulfilled, place where they all of a sudden have figured it out, right? And I think we're all trying to get to that clarity place. But one of the things we're going to talk about today is what Adam's been up to since we last spoke about kind of the transformations he was helping others through, and kind of what's been going on in Adam's world since we last spoke about a year and a half ago. So Adam, thanks so much for joining us and looking forward to diving in.
Thanks, man. I am truly honored, Greg. I love this. I told you, when we were getting set up, I was kind of nervous the first time. And a lot of that, when we're nervous, a lot of us have learned, that it's kind of an excessive focus on us when we're nervous. So I hear things weird, dude, music in the background, writing. It's like today I'm calm and chill because I believe that I have a clarity that I didn't have confidence in the first time. And bless your people, that they saw some value there.
That's amazing. I think we're all evolving, and we have to recognize that when we're in that moment, we don't feel like we're still evolving. We're like, we need to be perfect right now. And if we're not, then, we're not taking the right action, but you taking that, what I call the imperfect action, even though you didn't feel that full 100% clarity, it still impacted so many people. So it's just incredible. And
it's the only way.
It is, yeah.
It's the only way to get to the excellence. You played ball. I mean, how many times did you throw a perfect pitch before you started the day?
Not many.
How many times do you throw a perfect pitch, right?
Yeah.
We just watched the World Series, so yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, if you're successful 3 out of 10 times, you're the best
Hall
in the
of
game.
Fame, baby.
Yeah. So
That's
it's just
right.
incredible. One of the things I think a lot of our folks listening in today are navigating is this chase to be financially, emotionally secured, but then still feel fulfilled in what they're doing. We talked a lot about, it's not happiness we're really chasing. Happiness is a word, we label it. But I want to kind of start there with how we kind of led our last conversation was, who are you? Kind of getting that clarity on who are you actually as a person, and then bringing that into everything you do, work and family and, faith-wise. And, how has that evolved for you, kind of understanding what fulfillment means for you, but then helping other people reach that fulfillment when they're still trying to reach, stay goal-oriented? Because I think, us as high performers, we're so goal-oriented that we miss out on all the fulfillment and enjoyment along the way most of the time.
Yeah, the typical path that we're taught, I think that a lot of us can relate to. It's not wrong per se, but it's very deceptive. We get confused on that because performance, grades, you bring your report card home for 13 straight years, usually, to someone who's going to look at that. And most of us were raised by people. A lot of us were raised by people who said, "Oh, well, why is that A minus not an A?" Especially on this podcast, right? Why is that B plus not an A minus? It's like, oh wow, so that over 15, 20 years, the conditioning, you can't outrun that. And so how do we figure out who we are? And I heard a pastor a long time ago say, man, we can find this, find that, find this in our spirituality, and find peace and love and in service. But very few of us ever find ourselves spiritually in our own identity.
Yeah.
Like, so, and one of the things, to me, it's simple. Fulfillment is being faithful to your core values. When you're faithful to your core values, okay, let me put, that's part of the equation. The other part of the equation is executing those values, executing the action of them. Because if you are faithful to those core values, then you, by definition, have to execute in them. And a simple example I use, and this is in my personal life, it's super clear, and someone's already repeating it to me that I'm using with clients. They're giving it back to me, so I'm going to give it to you because I know it scored. And that is this idea that I've been married 23 years in December. If you don't count the divorce time, they can listen to the other episode to find out that story.
Yeah.
But 23 years this December, 27 years together with her, 4 kids. I don't always look at her with googly eyes and love bugs swirling in my belly. And on those nights, I know that I don't want to go to bed upset with her. And if we didn't get a chance to talk and figure it out, I don't want to go to bed mad and feeling some kind of way. So one of the things that is a core value to me is serving my wife. That means no matter how mad I get at her at times, and sometimes I do get frustrated because she can't understand me and I don't get her and all the normal stuff, I make her coffee for her anyway to go off in the morning. So when she's in the gym by 5 a.m. training her clients, she didn't have to get up and make coffee at 5:20, 5:30. And that might seem like super superficial or whatever, but I'm telling you, the guy that keeps coming to me that's helping him in his marriage at 50 years old, he every time he sees me, dude, just make the coffee. And he fist bumps me. Just make the coffee. Just make the coffee. Because it's helping him be aligned to his core values, which is to love his wife, even when he feels emotionally like he doesn't want to. So we betray ourselves by our feelings a lot, and that's one simple way.
Wow. Betray ourselves by our feelings. That's amazing. I think it's a lot of people think about, like you feel and then you act, or you act, then you feel. And which one is more important? Do you take the action to get the feeling, or do you feel like you should take the action and then take the action? I think that you hit the nail on the head there. It's really the action, and the feeling probably comes after. Because a lot of times we don't feel like doing that. We don't feel like doing the things that we know we need to do, so we avoid them. And I think that's like one of those root causes, I think, for a lot of different things that happen negative to people. Obviously, you can't control everything, but when it comes to the uncontrollables, I think a lot of times that's what's happening, is we're waiting to feel to take the action, and most of the time that feeling's never going to come unless we take the action, execute on those core values.
Yeah, absolutely. Pillar number 7 of the revolutionary freedom, it's called cultivate. And part of that is where I help people not be led by emotions, but use them as the supernatural guidance factors that they are. Which you have to, there's massive distinction in that, because I don't believe in saying, if you get with real religious folks, a lot of times in my experience, and I've been in that world, that they're like, feelings are trash.
Yeah.
F your the real hardcores, F your feelings. I'm like, well, no, maybe we just don't be led by them, but we pay attention to them, because if you feel really freaked out and your hair stands up on the back of your neck, you might be in the woods being stalked by a bear. It's a good thing. But no, but that's the distinction, right? It's not all or nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you think? Yeah, go ahead.
No, please ask a question if you have it.
I was going to say, where do you think the line is of feeling too much and not feeling enough? Yeah, I think it's
Let me
different for
put,
everybody, but yeah.
well, yeah, and what are we applying it to, right? Because we're going to have feelings about everything. I didn't want to go for that little run this morning. I didn't feel like it because when I wake up in the morning, I don't feel like crushing anything but a cup of coffee. Like that is it. So I go on this little run. Why? Because I know for me to show up accountable, to be faithful to my core values, to not betray myself, that means I need to give my best to the honor that you're giving me by, hey, dude, let's take up a whole episode on my podcast with your face. And so, like, what do you have for people? And I'm thinking about, I got blank faces in my mind that come off of you this morning, but I'm like, how am I going to give these people my best? It's not just drinking a bunch of caffeine because then I'm going to overwhelm anyway, and I didn't. But the run, why'd I run? So I could be in an optimal state of energy to come in here sharp without being obnoxious. My wife's listening, probably not. It's like, that's it. And then you show up, but that's leading the feelings. Okay, I want my feelings to help me, but I have to get them into a state where they can. And if I stayed with the coffee this morning, they would have betrayed me because I didn't lead them. I lead the feeling by going to get the endorphins on the road.
Yeah.
And now I got the endorphins, and now I'm making them my servant instead of my master.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the ways that I do that with clients, and this is corporate or individual, but today's individual. So, and I have permission to talk about him. I'm going to tell you about a guy named Austin, a 30-something former college football player, career-ending knee injury, basketball, career-ending knee injury, surgeries, prescriptions, and then legal stuff because of addictive factors that came into there later. Years of down this road when I met him. The first thing, not everybody's in a mess. He was. I was. But when we met, struggling, right? What I knew with his level of discontent inside, he was not being faithful to what he truly believed in. And about half of it, he couldn't even articulate when we first met. I had to help him figure out what he believed in. And that's not abnormal. So one of the tools that I use is called Radar. And we can give these gifts away too. I got a couple little PDF gifts that we can give your people. Radar is reflect, aware, decide, or it's actually a D squared. I'm confusing. It's decide determine, then decide.
Yeah.
You have to determine good or bad or positive, negative, and then you decide how you're going to deploy it. And then the next A is adjust. And then the R is repetition. But when I say repetition, I got a little framework that I call the divine order of repetition. This isn't Grandpappy's factory line repetition. This is not that. This is repetition for transformation. And that's different. And so, but that's Radar. So what we do, Radar is a self-awareness accelerator. That's what I call it. It's a self-awareness accelerator. This is designed to help. This was born on the dark mornings of meditation, post-traumatic stress after Afghanistan. And I had to find a way when I couldn't always get to a therapist or talk to a mentor or someone who loved me in the morning. People are going to work. Like, you find yourself alone battling these things. I don't want to get emotional. It's starting to come up right now, and I don't want to do that. But that was a very serious journey that I went through to develop the clarity on these tools. The very first thing we have to do is discover from my trauma nursing days, I like to think about it as stop the bleeding. Yep. So that's what we helped Austin do. We came in and stopped the bleeding. How? Well, you're doing things actively that is betraying you. You're doing things that you don't believe in. And it might not be like unethical or immoral. I don't mean it like that. I mean, you get pissed at your wife, so you just let her make the coffee in the morning. You're betraying what you believe in. And that's going to make you even uglier. And then you get defensive and then everything. But so Radar stops the bleeding. It helps what I call spot sneaky ass sabotage. That's what I call it. You spot this because this is why I call it that. We're going along just fine. And then all of a sudden, dude, what was that? How does that just take $1,500 out of my pocket when we were getting ahead? Sneaky sabotage. Mm-hmm. So it works on that. And then it helps. The third thing it helps you do is determine that next best step today. Not tomorrow or next year or quarter 4 or 3 or 2. It is now. And so that's the big first step that I do to help someone come back to get on the directional path, directionally correct, not perfect, right? Like you were alluding to, like you said, directionally correct. There's no tool that I found better and more simple for someone like me than Radar. I got a little PDF download, nice little trainer. They can get that for free.
Do you think you can come to that moment of clarity without an outside person or perspective? Do you think you can come, because it's different for everybody, right? I think we're all navigating life in a way where we might know there's bleeding going on, but we may only see that one spot, but there's like 6 other spots, and we're like, it's constant triage, right? It's like constant trying to get too discovery focused, where we're like, we're bleeding. Then you become kind of hypochondriac, where you're like, I'm broken, I'm not right, I need to fix this, I need to fix that. And I think sometimes that distracts us from, I think that's what a lot of business owners are going through that are listening in. They can go and be the perfect boss, the perfect leader, the perfect person. But when they come back, they're still asking themselves, who am I, and what do I need to do to fix myself, right? Because I'm fixing all of these other things all day. And I think that's where they just get stuffed down, and it never gets, they never stop the bleeding, so they can't continue that process of improvement, because they're improving over like a bleeding wound. They're just putting stuff on top of it.
Yeah. And a lot of that, we have such being a connected type of mentality person, you're naturally, you probably don't need to be taught a whole lot of things or reinforced about the idea of personal ownership. I'd say that that's probably a trait in this audience, right? Like to a certain degree, lesser or greater. And then there's other audiences, like you can't get them to own anything, and because it's pure victim mentality, pure, I'm just receiving here on the bow of a boat, whatever wind or wave wants to crash me. And so, but for these people, what's helped me relax is that this is what I tell my kids. And I do this professionally, man, in boardrooms. It's amazing what the structure of a family, like how that translates into the world. But anyway, what's the fastest way out of a situation you hate? This is what I'm telling the kids, because all they want to do is play PS5 or do something else, and I got them doing work, right? Or reading a book, and they're not just in love with it yet. And so I don't want to push it, because then they'll hate it. So what's the fastest way out of a situation you hate? And I have experience doing this in big time careers, like being stuck in the military when I didn't want to be anymore. And I went through a very bad period, or being in nursing when I fell into IV drugs. Like, it's like, how? Well, you do the absolute best with the resources at your disposal right now. There's nothing else you can do. And if you realize the simplicity of that logic, it should allow you to relax a little bit and just go, okay, all I have to do is maximize right now. I don't know if my marriage is ever going to get better than this today, but let me tell you something. I made a promise, and I'm going to covenant, and I'm going to make the freaking coffee. And I go back to it, because if you do that, that's the best you could have done. You go lay down without making that coffee, you could have done that. You actually sold yourself out by trying to get her because she's not listening. And that comes from a book called Anatomy of Peace by the Harbinger Institute. And I read that years and years ago, and they actually taught me when I was in the Army. I read this and learned, they do workshops too, that I learned how you can be a combatant in war, where your duty is to kill an enemy and not hate that person, actually have love for them still as an enemy on the battlefield. And that's a radical thought process, but that's the extreme version of this, right? And so the other thing, the flip side of that, or the fastest way out of a situation you hate, do it with everything you got, with all you have. And then it lends to point 2 is have a great attitude. Now we're leading our feelings again.
Yeah.
We're leading them. Because we can look at a feeling and go, okay, this is kind of poisonous. If I extrapolate this out, that's probably going to end in a ticket on the road, jail time, firing, fines, whatever, right? Divorce, breakups, estrangement. You don't know. Human pride has no limits to the damage it can bring. And so that's it. So those two things. But that's also the fastest way into a situation you love. Doing everything, you know this as a pitcher.
Yeah.
You knew this. Like you battled in obscurity, in shadows. And then somebody saw that and it popped into an opportunity here and there that elevated you, right?
Yeah,
It's the way it goes. Yeah. One of the ways that I do that is the second part of, so radar is what I call stabilize and maximize. Radar is to stabilize and maximize. We're going to stabilize where you are, and we're going to maximize what you're doing. That stops the bleeding, but it doesn't focus on bleeding. It moves quickly. If the kitchen's flooding, just turn off the sink, stop the leak, mop it up, and now we're going to work on renovation. The garbage is past us. We get past that fast. The second part is reigniting the fire or getting hyper clear on what that fire is, and I call that revamp your vision. RYV is revamp your vision. That reignites the fire because now we're in a position of strength. Radar got us on the directionally correct path. Revamp your vision is it's a 5-day thing. It's a 5-hour thing. I use this in different ways, but it goes through a whole bunch of stuff. Everything from getting clear on what the vision is, formulating it. This helps with figuring out your purpose. We also we use radar training during that. We work on visualization, manifestation, these types of things, and actual concrete goal setting and formulating. And I have a triple tier thing, like everything's measured, right? In baseball, they measure everything because my mentor taught me, if it matters to you, you measure it. If you're not measuring it, does it matter to you? You got to figure that out because most of us aren't measuring everything that does matter, and I'm not going to be condescending, and I know that. So measure. And I got this 3 columns that measures your character or your integrity by a number scale, by the way. The second thing is going to measure your execution. And then what we do is, like for Austin, we go ahead and measure the quality of your relationships in your life because of what they drive. So it's your character as a person, your execution, and then relationships. All 3 of those areas. You can start out super low. We measure it over the months. And by measuring that, you actually grow in these most important areas. That comes along in the revamp your vision thing. So, and we ran, our last challenge was a few months ago of this. These are powerful concepts. These are very worth it concepts. So obviously,
Yeah, I love that. I love the measure piece because I think there's a lot of vision. There's a lot of identification that happens in the self-discovery world, but when it comes to the implementation and then the measure, like the continual measurement of what you said you wanted to do, it goes back to the concept of how long will you water the seed before the sprouts come? Like how much work will you put in before you give up? And I've seen that in hobbies I've gone down where it's like I reached that limit where I'm like it's no longer worth watering this because I don't see it in my future. It's not in that vision that's been revamped.
That's right.
It's like you almost have to get rid of and unbecome things in order to get there. And I think a lot of times we think what's going to solve the bleeding is just getting more skills or adding more people to our lives or going out and doing that thing with the friends you shouldn't be with or you should be with to distract yourself from actually confronting it. And I think that's you were hitting on that, and I think it's an important point for people to attach to that. It's not necessarily adding on. It's getting rid of certain things. I think when you talk about the process of like stabilize, maximize, revamp your vision, and then measure it, a lot of people get to that visioning. They do the vision boards and all of these different things, but they never get to that measurement point. Do you have a system or do you have a recommendation for people to not micro measure, but better measure, the visions and the goals that they have? Because I think that's something a lot of people don't do. I only started doing it recently where I'm measuring on paper. I'd be like, is it good or bad? Like, is the situation good or bad? Is it leading me to where I want to go? But better ways to measure.
It came up. So it came out on a podcast a while ago that I was doing with another guy. I was actually doing the host part, and he came on and we talked, and he was saying some things about him and his wife, and it was a good marriage. It wasn't a marriage problem. It was like they had this thing that they were working on. You said you were going to do school. We're looking for extra income. The school thing's not happening, or we're not. It was one of these normal things, right? And I said, okay. Did you do this? Did you do that? And if I'm talking to a man, I'm gonna hit him with accountability before I ever put anything on her. And so I'm like, okay, did you guys do this? Did you get clarity over here? Well, kind of not really. And I'm like, okay, so let me, then I asked him, I said, I want to get this right. You have this vision. You bailed on hobbies that you knew weren't necessarily part of that vision. And it's really good. We're not taught well enough the art of quitting things in America, in this culture, by our parents. We need to be taught to quit, because quitting is a beautiful idea, properly applied. So it's over here, like, what do I do? Okay, well, here's the thing. Here's the vision. Here's me today, but here's the vision. If this vision, let's just say it's 3 years down the road. 3 years, very consumable for a mature adult that's been on the planet longer, 10 years into adult life. We know this. It's not long. You look at that and you say, who do I need to be in that picture in order to lead the frame that I'll be in at that point? Who do I need to be in there? Because if I was that person already, I wouldn't be standing here still.
Yeah.
So who do I need to be in that picture? And then I work at that. And to me, that's the guidepost, and then the measurement, right? So what I call that is a 3TPA. That's what it's called in my material. I don't advertise it. It just comes along. And when I do work with people, work with clients, is a triple tier power accelerator. And I call it that, big old clunky name, because it's dorky and it's a little bit memorable. At least, what's that stupid thing you called it? And like, but the measurement system is genius. It's built into Excel. It does automatic calculations, and it's on an exponential scale of 1,000 out of 3 columns of 10 when you rate yourself. So you use that in conjunction with keeping the vision clear. We're always iterating the vision, clarifying. We observe something we don't like, we get rid of it, we hone it. One example, when I started getting into personal development, I'd hear the people on seminars always talking about 10,000, 15,000 square foot mansions on the ocean. I'm like, yeah, that's what I want. I want that. I really do. Yeah. And I want a staff of 20 people roaming around my home that I have to manage. No, I don't. When I started touching that lifestyle, I'm like, seeing it, I'm going, I don't want that. And then I see hurricanes hitting the coast, and I live 3 miles off the coast. I don't want that at all. So I remove that from the vision. And so with that, revamp your vision. I call that second. So we got radar with stabilize and maximize. Revamp your vision, I call expand. Yeah. That's the expand piece. The third piece helps clarify that very question of measurement, concrete measured progress toward a worthy ideal. Someone called that success, right? Progressive realization of a worthy ideal, success. So the 7 pillars of revolutionary freedom, this is the part that I call evolve. This is where your evolution comes in. You're not just expanding anymore. You're not just going from 100 to 150 to 200K a year. You're evolving into something new. So if you notice, what I love about this, radar, to stabilize and maximize, you're kind of in the larva stage. Revamp your vision, you're expanding. You're now a caterpillar. You're roaming around. The evolution phase comes when you turn into the butterfly you were born to be. Big tough guys, ready to be a butterfly, sweetheart? But I think the analogy of the metaphor is clear, right? It is. It's an evolution of your expansion. For most of us listening, if we're making 100 or 200 or 300 or 500 or even 7 figures in our business or more, this is about your potential, and no one can tell you what that is. Like this, the progressive consistency to the process is how you get into that vision of something else. Something else. Man, it's big. That's and down there where we stop the bleeding, where we reignite the fire, the 7 pillars, the evolution phase. This is when we begin reaping all of the sowing. Mm-hmm. This is when the harvest comes. But if you're looking for that sprout to come and you keep watering in sunlight and keeping it fresh, keeping the weeds out, you got to pull weeds, right? This is getting rid of stuff. Yeah. It's like, We have to know what we're planting. And here's what I mean by that. Do you know that bamboo takes 5 to 7 years to show above the ground?
Wow. Yeah.
We can sit on that for a minute. It's very instructive. What have you been planting for 5, 7, 10, 15, 20 years that isn't showing above the ground yet? An oak tree. Like, there's red oaks, these giant red, I don't know all the science and all the botany of it, but these things, some of them they say are 1,000 years old. I don't know how long they took to plant, but little winds aren't blowing these things down. And, you know, fire can, but that's character, and we all saw the Diddy stuff. We don't want to get into that. That's a whole new lane. But those three portions, to me, there's a handful of foundational pieces, and it goes up. That's the beginning of true transformation.
Yeah.
Most of that stuff is working on you, getting your head right. We know we got stuff wrong in there. Here's the quickest thing I do to know that you're not yourself. This is what I do with people first. I can do this in standing in a line anywhere. I'll ask you, well, what do you do? Like, how do you help people figure out, like, man, okay, what's the number one most repetitive pattern you have in your life that you don't like that you do? When you answer that question, what is your most unwanted, repeated pattern that you do? You do it. No one makes you do this. You do it. You do it with money. You do it with your fitness. You do it with your relationships. You do it every single time, or all the time, regularly. That thing is not you. That didn't come from you. That came from the conditioning of the people who raised you. And it was set in there by the time you were 8 years old. So I don't get crazy on therapy, but what I do to also answer your question, like, can you figure out some of these things? Like, can you figure it out all on your own, this and that and the other? Yeah. It's not ideal, but I do also pitch Radar as a self-coaching tool. And on the landing page, it says, without another therapist, without smashing another beer, or without your neighbor's opinion.
Yeah.
And the reason I said those things, because that's what I related to when I was figuring out post-traumatic stress. I've done cognitive behavioral therapy. I've been to a handful of therapists. I've talked to friends, and I tried the alcohol thing for a quick minute. That wasn't long. But I know guys and gals from those times, and, you know, that's some of the coping mechanisms. But overall, it's, you know, Proverbs says that success comes from many advisors. And I think that they need to be the right advisors. We need to have extreme prejudice about who we allow the inputs into our brain. But yeah, that's always on a wiser side of things. But Radar will help raise somebody's awareness to that thing they don't like doing, because that's not who they are. You get rid of that, you're like, oh, wow, I could look. That is Uncle Rick. That is Papa. You know, that is Mama. That's the beginning of everything right there.
It is, yeah. Yeah, I love how you structured that system of gaining clarity, because I know that's been something that I know I continue to look for. As I get a little bit more clarity, I'm looking for that next system to get a little bit more clear. So it's great that you've been able to take your own clarity and then find a way to structure it to get other people to achieve that. I think that's incredible and definitely impactful. One of the things that really impacted me throughout my journey was doing all the exercises, but until I kind of put it out into the world, and I think that was action for me. I needed to start talking about those things that I envisioned on these, you know, exercises that I was doing. I was, you know, rating myself daily, but until I took it out into the world and said, you know, tear this system apart of how I'm thinking about things, and I was like, wow, there's so much more out there that I could, you know, focus my energy on, not different, but just in different ways, and kind of organizing my garden. I think you went back to that, kind of organizing my garden in a way that there's clarity on what I'm growing, and then just being focused on improving that each and every day has been huge for me, as opposed to be like, oh, I have to build this, you know, 10-acre farm, and, you know, where do I start? And if I just think about the 10 acres that I don't have yet, then I feel unworthy, and it's harder to take action because I don't have that feeling back.
Let me encourage you on this, on a personal side, how I apply these things. Dude, from August 1st, I picked up a 5-day-a-week training for one of my kids in gymnastics. 5 days a week. We drive an hour from here. And that's an hour home. Did I mention it's 5 days a week? All 5 of the weekdays? I love this kid, but we're giving everything we can to maximize their development. But in that, we had to shuffle our life, a family of 6 plus a dog around, right? And I had to use radar after I got a couple weeks in going, I applied radar going, I'm getting freaked out, like beyond my capacity here. And I don't normally feel like that. And I used it, applied it. We made adjustments to our schedules. So we applied it to the family schedule and got things back in order, which meant my kids were stable, which was my big goal, the vision. Make sure my kids are stable in maximizing their development with what my resources can do today. I'm not upset that I can't have them learning golf from Tiger Woods at whatever price an hour, if Tiger ever did that, because that's not where okay, let me put it this way. I can't do that today. That's how I use the word can't.
Yeah.
But I can work toward things. But today, they're maximized. So when I realize they are, I got to put more effort into my own push for the brand and getting this message out there. When I say the brand, dude, we're taking the family back, man. That's my ultimate, it's probably my ultimate mission, is to take the family back. You know some of my story. Again, we talked about that in the first episode. It's near and dear to my heart. This is how I do it. So with that, I just got myself off. I got all tangential. I'm hearing that word a lot. I hit a tangent. Where was I going with that? Simple, right now, gymnastics. I brought him up.
Yeah.
We gave up 2 days a week. Or I have 2 adult kids almost. Yeah, I have 2 adult kids too. So I got each of them to pick up a day during the week. They're both busy to go do that hour. And then I'm here. Shoot, dude. I lost it. Help me out.
It's all right. Yeah. So I think you had to kind of prioritize.
We related.
Yeah, you had to prioritize the 5 days a week versus the other things you wanted to do with your kids. And
what did you say you were doing? You mentioned your example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, waiting for the feeling of it's right to actually take the action. It sounds like you took the action and said, we're going to do 5 days a week because it's right for them, and we'll figure the rest out on the back end. Potentially.
I lost it.
It's all right. It's all good. Yeah, we'll
could save somebody's forever. I mean, not because I'm thinking of it, because I got it from somebody and I spun it in my brain, and it's been helpful. Man, that was right there. This is the power of the distraction of tangents.
Yeah.
Right. Like I did it to set up the point, and then I lost the point.
Oh man, I love it.
Holy crap! I mean, you asked me we can't even rewind the tape.
It's all natural. That's the power of live. I think that's why people love listening in to the live aspect, because
I'm struggling with all this.
It's not choreographed, folks.
No, I struggle on a daily basis, and I use these tools on a daily basis to apply them, and they help me tremendously. Radar, the garden, get rid of, pull weeds, plant. Oh my gosh. I want this to be an encouragement. Thank you, Lord. 10-acre farm. You're feeling pressure.
Yep.
There are people listening because they have stuff they're trying to get to, like a 10-acre farm. Let me tell you something that's been put on my heart, and I've never publicized this ever. I finally started telling a couple people out loud. That's a key point, by the way. Like, how much do you believe in that vision, that goal, right? I have on my heart a 4,000-acre ranch. 4,000. I don't even know what that costs. I've looked up price tags. I've seen double-digit millions. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't mean anything. Because if you're charged with something and it's a real desire of your heart, and like I tell my kids, if you're pure in your heart's intentions, if your heart's right, you can't go wrong. I believe that. I believe we can make mistakes innocently, but if your heart's right, for the person trying to get something done in their life, purpose-driven person, you're not going to go wrong. So the question is, okay, how do we get there? I can't think about 4,000 acres today, or else it's overwhelming. What do I do today? I stop the bleeding. I maximize, I stabilize, I begin expanding, and then I work toward evolution. How do I do that? Radar, revamp your vision, revolutionary freedom. These are my frameworks that help. But how do I really do that anybody can do? You do the best with what you have, with everything you've got today. That means if you know of people who could possibly help you with what you're doing today, and you're not calling them, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What do we really believe in then? I can't betray what I want to do. Like, it reminds me, I just saw it over there in the thumbnail. It's producing versus consuming, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
I thought about that for a little while because I'd never seen that phrase like that. And you made me stop and think. That was a pattern interrupt for me, and I appreciate it. Like, I'm looking at it. It's not that I've never thought about the two differences, being a producer versus a consumer, but it hit my brain different this time. And I'm like, I think what we're really talking about here is discipline. But it's discipline to make sure that what we do on a daily basis aligns with how we really believe and see the vision, see ourselves in that future picture. And it's being faithful to it. You want to talk about fulfillment? Dude, I'm doing this show in a bathing suit because I can, because I'm finally at a point after however many knuckle-dragging and bleeding years of being faithful to a degree that I've been able to sow and reap some of the sprouting that's coming up. Nowhere near the giant red oak that I need of a 4,000 acre ranch that's going to help save marriages, save veterans and their families, raise kids up in leadership mentality and athletic excellence, and do all these things. I'm not the first guy to do these things, but I have a dream of doing it. And what I just said in the last whatever many seconds, that is the formula. It's not my idea.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing new, but there are cool spins and ways to put things. And for someone with maybe an intense type of personality or veteran background, athletic performance, elite mindset, you want to be there, these are helping some people.
Yeah. Yeah, they are.
So be encouraged, man. You keep the vision there. It doesn't move. 4,000 acres, families, saving the world, planting, whatever.
Yeah.
Doing all those. And plus, part of that acre dream is, for this little on a personal aside, is I want all 6 of my core family to live on it.
Live on that.
Not in a weird way. Like, we're not going to just making all of our own dresses and butter and stuff. Maybe. But in a way that we can all be on the same. This is the way kingdoms used to roll, man.
Yeah, it is.
Our little K6 empire. It's like, I want all of us there if they want to be there. My kids, I don't muscle them into anything, but if they want to be there, they can. We'll have little roads, and none of us will be able to see our each other's houses. We won't be able to see them at all. But we'll be together, and we'll be running the business and doing things and hopefully making a massive impact. But today, all I can do is what I can do. But if I don't even make the call or write the thing or do the grind work of figuring out how I make sense of the stuff that's helped me, that I've done over the last several years, like, who else am I selling out besides myself? And you wonder why you're frustrated in traffic. Wonder why it takes nothing for somebody in a grocery store to set you off when you're a good person. Why does your kid get snapped at the end of the night when you're a good family person or you're trying to do your best? Why? Because there's self-betrayal going on at a deep, deep level, and it's probably happening because you're following patterns that aren't you.
Yeah. Yep, that's the friction. That's the self-inflicted friction, and the external world is putting the pain on us, and we're the victim as opposed to choosing the pain based off of those core values in order to produce and not overconsume. Because we typically consume vices and things of that nature because we're trying to band-aid over something that we have not been able to confront to give us the clarity that we need. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that. And we talked about that last episode. It was so insightful just to be able to make that connection of that, like, self-worth aspect of what we're measuring ourselves on. And what are some stories, for the business owner, the individual that are trying to find themselves but feel like they have the outside world figured out. And typically when you're going through that process of trying to find yourself, that's when the outside world brings friction. So you go back to your cave and back to comfort as opposed to embracing the hard part. I almost feel like I wish we all had kind of like not a highlight reel, because we have it in our own heads, all the things we've been through to get to that point. But a lot of times people ask, they're like, Adam, how'd you get to that? You sound so clear now. How'd you get to that point? It must be nice. Must have been an easy process to get there because it looks so easy now. But in our own heads, we're like, we have this victim story of we had to go through all of this stuff to get here. And then we go back to being comfortable. And then it's like we've reached that goal. but just have that guiding light. I think that guiding light is so important, but then still enjoying the moment. I think that's what a lot of people are trying to figure out, consuming versus producing, because in my mind, it's like, let's produce all day and then we can consume a little bit of what we produce, and then produce, consume. But sometimes that's not the healthy route. It's that balance of being able to produce something that others consume and then enjoying it with them, right, alongside them, or
Yeah.
so
So we're getting into, you're alluding to like what drives you,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
right? And when I say if your heart's right, you can't go wrong. Well, we got to define right, I guess, for someone that we can go down that existential conversation. But what are you doing? And so here's a quick story. Worked with a guy some years ago when I didn't have the concepts as clear and digestible, as consumable as they are now.
Yeah.
As they are now. Let's stick with the theme. But I was doing this work with him and his team, about well over 100 staff, 5 locations, 2 states. I'd spend time one-on-one in an advisory role with the principal. How do I maximize my team? I get how the business works. The dude was competent, an excellent operator. What do I do with the team? How do I do this? How do I do that? These are normal things. Company culture, the buzzwords, right? Culture is an expression, as my friend Drew likes to say. Culture is an expression. And Drew is a former 9-figure dude who's been mastering all this stuff with Tony Robbins and all these things. So Drew's comment, culture is an expression, should hold weight. And when I think about that, okay, so we don't build culture. It's an outflow. That has to come from your heart. And then when that starts happening, when your attention, if my heart is to make sure that my garden in the backyard is super crisp and lush and nutritious and free of disease and weeds and threats, I got to do things to cultivate that. Pillar number 5. I got to cultivate it. And so we would work one-on-one, the principal and I, about, I'd ask questions. How about this person? How are you developing them? Asking questions around the thing where, let me back up a step. If I think my wife and kids are the issue, or my staff is the issue, you get where I'm going? What I'm going to do immediately is I'm going to only look outward.
Yeah, I heard some recently. It's if you're around all assholes, you're probably the asshole.
Right? Yeah. You're the right for sure.
If everybody else is, yeah.
Oh man, too many jokes. This is why I don't have a lot of caffeine before I do shows, because it's already happening off of one little tiny cup hours ago.
Right.
Oh my gosh. So we start talking about that when you ask questions. Radar, to stabilize and maximize, is the beginning of your awareness process, because it's going to force you to ask those reflective questions. The first R's is reflect. So we have to reflect. Reflection, guess what? I'm tricking the tough people into meditating.
Yeah.
You talk to yourself all day long anyway. All day we're talking to ourselves, reinforcing stories. Radar can help pattern interrupt those stories and change them. But if you're only looking out at the staff as being the issue, you can't get there, because they're going to be the issue. And so it's like, if my heart is to truly build a great organization so we all prosper, then the question is, who do I need to be in that picture to make that happen? And if I'm not fanning their flames, and I am a dictator, or maybe an egomaniac or whatever, then they're there to serve me. And you need to understand, as that type of leader, look around right now, because you have peaked, my friend. You've peaked. You've hit your leadership lid, I think Jim Collins or John Maxwell calls it. You've hit it. Boom, boom, boom. You're frustrated for that reason, because you know you got all this other potential, but probably, if that's the case, we have to turn the gaze inward. right? Like the old analogy of great leaders, that they in great times they go to the window because they give it to the people, right? George Washington did this with America. He was truly maybe the only president in history. I don't know. I don't want to get political at political season, but George Washington, only one who's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be your president.
Yeah.
Because it turns into a king and then you're going to worship me. I read the speech, man. I read the speech. The dude did not want the job. That was a man who only looked inward, probably.
Right.
But in good times, he's like, let's build something great. But in bad times, the great leader comes and says, what am I missing? What am I missing? Who really am I to get to that next level? Who do I have to be to get to that next level? Radar is the self-coacher, but that's the mentality, is find someone who can help you see things you're not seeing. And usually in 5 minutes, especially with a principal, because they are such clear, strong characters, and I myself, I resonate, I'm kindred. Like, it's so simple because when you work with hard drivers, they're not as complicated as someone who's a lot quieter and subdued.
Yeah.
We're not. It doesn't mean we're simple and dumb. It means what we do, we operate a bit more simple without the complexity, because that's why we're good executors, right? That's why we execute. My wife is better than me at this. She's better. She will be our operator in order to have that 4,000 acre ranch. I will not do that. The place will burn to the ground. I am not the operator guy. That's why I hang around with my friend Drew, because he's a generation before me and his brain is phenomenal for it. I'm like, let's go fire people up and cast vision, you know?
Yeah.
But for that leader, if you've been bumping into a spot forever, for the last quarter, 6 months, couple years, however, how long, my friend, lovingly, I tell you, you got to look inside. The answer's inside now. And probably your people need you to be something that you haven't been yet. People are definitely, there's issues with people, but it can't be all the people. Plus, you hired them. Or you hired the people that hired them. So it's okay. It's okay. We'll get through that.
Yeah. Yeah, you hit on such an important point of the distinctions of producing and consuming for the leader, because all consuming is not bad. And I think sometimes when we see in the title producing versus consuming, it's like, oh, we're in consumer, we're in the consumer area, everybody's over consuming, so it's like a negative term. But it's a which lever are you going to pull on? Are you going to produce because of what state you're at? And that's what you're talking about for the leader. He had to kind of pull back and consume, or like a George Washington had to pull back and consume what other people wanted him to do, versus producing his, I want to be in my shell and I don't want to be president. I don't want to be in this big role that's glorified and gets all of this attention. That's him producing what his vision. Then he had to pull back and consume, which I think the initial question of, where do leaders find themselves? I think that point is so critical for them getting that clarity and then being able to execute and go through the friction, because they now know what consuming and producing looks like and when they need to pull on those different levers. And most of the time it's consume because I'm uncomfortable and produce when I'm comfortable, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Nail on the head there.
That is a great point. You said working through the friction. A great place a leader can start to find out, like, if they're really trying to get secure in their own identity. And by the way, when you don't muscle it around people.
Yeah.
You actually are much more gentle. I think this is absolute for humanity. It's like when a Lamborghini pulls up next to a Sonata. My neighbor's Sonata is outside. I'm not picking on Hyundai. A Lamborghini next to a Sonata. Only a douche in a Lamborghini will floor it off the line next to a Sonata. Like, if you want to play around with a BMW i8, okay, now we can, but you don't muscle people. So that guy, we began spending more time with his management in one-on-one, heart-to-heart, but just honest conversations. So I would mediate and facilitate, and he would hear and listen instead of being ready to tell him something. As that happened, people began feeling heard. And I would drive around with in the passenger seat advising. We're talking throughout the day, and this dude's staring out the window daydreaming because he's considering thoughts he'd never thought of.
Yeah.
And it helps. Yeah. And in that company, we saw a 40% increase in profits that stuck because of changing relational tendencies, changing character tendencies, and changing executional tendencies. The 3 areas we're measuring, right?
Yep.
So that was really huge. And I wanted to make this one last comment about you saying go through the friction for these guys. If they're trying to get there, I keep a little, I started doing this. This is 2 weeks old for me, barely. I needed a better system. I love Post-its because I get a lot of random ideas that just pop in, and I'll use Dropbox, Evernote, email app, the Notes app, and they're all over the place. So I got a new little notebook that I can just keep running flows of thought, and then I can eventually maybe even just throw away. What I would use this for is for that leader, grab whatever works for you. Start observing all areas of friction throughout the day. We can call this, Mark Twain, they asked him how he was so funny and all this, and how he says the stuff that he says, and it was, nobody's ever had the cleverness of him, right? And he's like, I'm a prodigious noticer. So become an extreme, an obsessive noticer. That doesn't mean you're an obsessive judger. Yep. I say this for the others out there like me. You get an idea, okay, this is really good, and you're going to place a judgment on it. No, we're not going to judge it.
Yeah.
Not yet. Yeah. Not yet. That's what radar is for down the road, down in the process of radar. And I got a little sheet. When they download that, they can get it. And so when you notice this and you observe these things, I don't want that, okay? I just yelled at the person when they asked. All my assistant did was ask me if we were placing a new order. Whatever the thing is, man. They told me that so-and-so called off and we need whatever. I don't like that. Well, that's personnel. Complaints. Observe what you don't like, the friction. Whenever I go to the gas station, if there's somebody and I got to wait for a pump, I freak out. Traffic is slowing down. I say the F word. I drop F-bombs as soon as the traffic slows down. These are areas of friction. They're not serving you. You write them down. Anything. And then you start looking at, you'll find common themes. There's going to be themes. It's not about the minutia. It's about the themes. And so it's not about that Sandy called off of work. It's about the fact that your system might need an improvement or an enhancement in staff relations. So you start observing, and then over time, then we'll begin assessing for meaning. The problem is we're talking to ourselves all day long in these stories that have meaning that we're assigning that probably come from before we were 8 years old, and we can't figure out why we got all this potential and we're playing smaller than what we should be.
Wow, that's a point of put a pin in that. Couldn't have said it any better. I think that's a clear point everybody was seeking before joining the show, and I'm sure they're glad that they did for that point. There's a lot there. Adam, before we get to the last question here, which is the question we like to end the show with, where can folks find you, look for you? Obviously, we'll put the exercises in the show notes that you mentioned. Where can folks reach out and connect with you further?
I'm going to offer one thing. If you wanted to plug any of the socials and they want to do their, they can do that. But you're not going to get a ton of value from my socials because, frankly, I suck at it and I haven't given the time and attention and investment it needs to be great at it or to even be good at it. So what I want to offer is a free call, a free discovery call to have a conversation. I promise it's not a sales call. If it wants to go there and someone wants to lead there, we can talk about that too. I'm glad to. I'm out here for who I'm for or to lead you to who might be for you. I look at myself like that as a resource hub more than I do like an offering hub. Because if I'm only offering, now I need you to accept.
Yeah.
I don't even live my life that way. I don't treat my 12-year-old, 13-year-old that way. I don't. So they can go do that, and it's chat.adamk6.com.
Perfect.
Chat.adamk6.com. They're going to grab a discovery call. Very easy. Let's get to know each other. Let's see what they're dealing with. Let's see if they have, we explore it.
Mm-hmm. Love that.
That would be the best possible value I can give, because on that call, if somebody wants to pick my brain for a half an hour about their issue, I'm going to help them.
Yeah.
I'm going to give them everything I got with it.
That's huge. That's huge value. We'll definitely make sure that link's in the show notes as well. Adam, we've talked a lot about heart set before you get to that execution mindset. I think a lot of times on this show, the title is mindset, but we determine through the stories we share how important heart set is and getting to that connected point. So one of the ways we like to wrap up the show, because we could go on for hours, is what is
Easily.
connection? What does connection mean to you today?
I remember this question, and I haven't the foggiest idea of what I said last time. And it's interesting because I can't wait to hear what the difference is. What does connection mean to me today? Presence. There's no doubt. Being present and accounted for.
Yeah, right.
So it's a two-part process for me, and it means present and accounted for. We just launched, based on the demand from this material on the corporate side, I needed a way to fulfill the duties in my life. Don't forget 4,000 acre ranch. It's probably the biggest thing I'll ever do in my life, maybe. I can't do that for free. That needs money. And so, but when I look at present and accounted for, I think about men, specifically men. Now, I do work with men, women, all these things. Mostly women have followed my podcast to a tune of 8 out of 10. And they mostly engage the social media stuff, but that's probably normal behavior anyway between the two genders. So when I'm looking, I'm like, okay, let's see. I needed a way to bring this 6-figure corporate program to an individual who, you know what it is? Low barrier entry to high barrier elite level coaching. And what we had to figure out was we came up with this little thing called roll call. And people can ask me about this, or they can pursue this later, but I'm not pitching this necessarily, but I'm just announcing it to you because this is what connection means to me. And this is the outflow of this, me executing on that, being faithful to that value. I asked my wife, we sat in our bathroom, man. She sat in the tub, shaving her legs, and I'm sitting against the sink. And I asked her, how can I do this for men? It's a passion of mine when I also need to be fiscally responsible. I need to be financially responsible to our house and the missions that are on our heart. It's like, okay, so we came up with this idea and we gave it a name. 2 calls on Sundays throughout the month, quick calls, but it's called roll call. And I asked myself, what is it for a man? What does it mean for a man to show up present and accounted for, ready to rock his mission? What is that called when a man is ready to is showing up present and accounted for? 12 years, I'm like, it's roll call.
Yeah.
It's roll call. So we're doing a roll call. We're implementing it. We haven't even done one yet. Official, it's coming next month and this month. And we're going to do roll call because it's for men, because real men show up present and accounted for, ready to rock their mission. And to me, that's why I know I was excited and not nervous to talk to you today for your people, because I know that I'm showing up as my best now, 10:16 Eastern, whatever it is. I don't have time. Now. That doesn't mean I'm going to at 1 p.m. That's accountability. That's me leading my emotions at 7 p.m. when my wife is exhausted because she's a personal trainer, and then I take something personal because she's tired.
Yeah.
That's present and accounted for. Every single moment, every single word. The power of life and death is in our mouth, is in the things that we say, our energy. So that's what it means to me today. Yeah,
I love that. Present and accounted for. You're present and accounted for on 10/16 on Friday the 1st. You're present for roll call, and I appreciate that about you. It shines through in the light and the impact you have through your words, that you think through them before putting them out to the world, and you're shining that light through your heart. Obviously, it's coming out your mouth in words, but you're leading with your heart. I think that's so important. How core love is, and having that appropriate heart set is to conveying a clear message, and that's exactly what you did today. So, Adam, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for being on, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Greg. And I just want to remind people that those beautiful things that you just said was they came out of a transformative process because of how ugly that I treated people for the first 10 years of my adulthood. Number one on that list was myself. Number two was my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I destroyed that marriage, our first marriage, my 2-time wife.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how, because I was one of the worst ever at all of this.
Yeah.
But go get them, guys. We need you. We need you performing your thing. We need you showing up, present and accounted for. What you do matters. Your people need you. You need you. And I'm talking to your people right now because they do. It really, really matters to figure this stuff out. It does. That's why I appreciate what you do. And as I told you that before, I ain't going to gush all over you now, but it matters. So
Thanks,
thank you.
brother. I appreciate that.
Yep.